And now here's everything you're going to need to perform a belt adjustment, drive belt adjustment on your Yamaha Raider. You're going to need some wrenches, a breaker bar, another type of wrench. Mainly you're going to need a 5mm hex socket, a 6mm hex socket, a 12mm socket, a 12mm wrench, a 27mm socket, a belt tension gauge, 10 pounds of pressure test, and a foot-pounds torque wrench, and an inch-pounds torque wrench, and a Sharpie to mark your bolts so you can keep track of how many spins you're doing on them. And that's it, folks. My gosh, what am I thinking? One of those. Well, first you're going to need a belt tension gauge. I'm going to use this one. And there is a black line on this thing. It says right here, 10 pounds of pressure. So if you rotate it, you will see a black line. You want to move this O-ring till it's right over that black line. That's how you properly use this gauge. And what's going to happen is you're going to push up on it, and when that O-ring just touches the bottom of this thing, there's going to be 10 pounds of pressure on your belt. Okay, so when your Raider is on its kickstand, these are the measurements for when your Raider's on its kickstand, and these natural partitions are 5mm apart. Now if you look in your instruction manual, when your Raider's on its kickstand, they're supposed to be 7.5mm from baseline to no more than 13mm. Okay, so here's our baseline right here. Here's about 7.5mm, and here is probably our 13mm mark. And we're going to measure this with 10 pounds of pressure real quick, so you can see why I marked these the way I did. So here's baseline, going up to 10 pounds of pressure, and you can see right there that I'm way up here. So if this 13mm mark is my maximum, I'm about 4mm beyond that. And my belt is squeaking every time I kick it into gear or shift, and that's a clear-cut sign that you need to tighten your belt. Well, for starters, jack your Yamaha Raider up, and as a good reference, I marked where the center point is. It's usually behind the kickstand and right in front of this bolt behind the kickstand, right there where that red mark is. Our axle bolt, which we need to loosen, and adjustment bolts are hidden behind this stock exhaust. So we're going to have to remove 5 bolts, it looks like, to begin with. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that's a 5mm hex. With our plate removed, we're going to now remove our bottom supports for the exhaust, 1 and 2, and that takes a 12mm socket. Now here's our muffler clamp, keeps pressure on the gasket. We're going to use a 5mm and loosen that. And finally, there's this top bolt here. It's a 6mm. Just remember, the back of your muffler is going to go here, and the bolt you took out is going to go up here, and that's pretty easy. And now we're going to look at this portion of our motorcycle. Now what I like to do is make a little mark before I start turning any bolts. This will allow me to know where my starting point was originally, and do this also on the other side of the bike. We're on the right side now, do it also on the left. And I will also want to draw your attention to these little markings here. I don't know if you can see them, they're real faint, they're in the metal. You want to make sure this notch on the bottom of your frame is on the exact same mark on one side of the bike as it is on the other, because this is your wheel alignment. So be very careful that both are the same. Now first we need to loosen our axle bolt here, and that is a 27mm socket. So I got a breaker bar here. We're just going to loosen it to where it's decent. We're not going to take it out, just loosen it. Now we're going to loosen this locking nut with a 12mm wrench, and to loosen on the right side of the bike you turn down so that the nut has free play in it, like so. Alright, now we're on the left hand side of the bike and we need to loosen this locking nut. To loosen this locking nut we are actually going to go up to loosen it. Okay, on the left hand side of the bike I'm turning up to tighten the belt, so I'm reading, these numbers are getting less going this way. I just gave it a few turns to instead of sitting on notch number 6, I'm now on notch about 5.5. I'm going to do that to the other side and then measure the tension on the belt. Now I'm on the right hand side of the bike and I need to adjust these numbers that are now set at 6 to 5.5. To do that, I actually need to turn this bolt downwards to tighten these numbers up to match the left hand side. Now if you remember, when our bike was on its kickstand, our measurements were between 7.5 millimeters and 14. Now that it's on a jack stand, we are going to start at baseline and our measurements now need to be between 14 millimeters and 21, so it's raised it up now. And also to get our measurements to where you know where they are, just count by 5s. 5, 10, 15 minus 1, about 14 there. And then just add 7, and that brings you to the top notch there for about 21. So anywhere in that green area is going to be safe. I'm looking to get closer to that 14 margin. So set our bottom grommet here on our measuring tool to 10 pounds of pressure, and voila, we are like right on the line there of 14, which is where I want to be. So now that we got our adjustments set and our tensions correct, we need to retighten our lock nuts. So on the left hand side of the bike, to tighten the lock nut, turn down 11 foot-pounds. Right hand side of the bike, to tighten the lock nut, we need to go up, and once again that's 11 foot-pounds. Very important, don't forget to tighten your axle bolt here, and that's going to be 110 foot-pounds. And you're going to need a torque wrench. We're there. Now if you look at the schematic, they recommend that you replace this gasket every time you remove the tailpipes, but this gasket looks like to be some copper based stuff and looks really good. I did buy one just in case, but I'm not going to use it because it's expensive. You know, it's like, I don't know, 10 bucks or something for one, and I'm just going to go with what's still there. So this is the model number and all if you need one for yourself, but don't use it if you don't have to. Oh, coming off is real easy, so we'll see if it goes on just as easy. I put my top bolt back in here, and looks like it's a very simple process to do. Go ahead and put this in, but do not tighten it. And go ahead and slip your exhaust on, but do not tighten that. What we're going to do is use leverage in here to align our two anchor bolts down here on our exhaust, because these two are relatively hard to get lined up if everything else is tight. Right. So these need to be torqued to 38 foot-pounds. And this bolt here needs to be 14 foot-pounds, but mine doesn't go that low, so I'm going to do it to 168 inch-pounds. Here we can tighten our gasket again, and everything else is pretty much like 7.2 foot-pounds. I have nothing that goes that low even, so I'm just going to give it a good hand tightening till it's snug and call it good. And finally put our flashy chrome back on. And again, 7.2 foot-pounds. And like all tightening procedures, put all your bolts in and get them started before you tighten. That way you can line them all up and you're not forcing it one way or the other. And also be sure to do this procedure on the bike when it's cold. Everything from measurement of your belt to doing the adjustments. Cold bike only.